Why, hello, darling. I came as soon as I heard that you watched Cruella. I have so many opinions. Come on, let's... What's that? What do you mean I can't smoke in here?
Alright, so Cruella has been out for
2 months.
And if you haven't seen it yet, first of all, spoilers. But second of all, you probably already know that there's a lot going on.
One of the most fun things to explore is her creativity.
It's a bit south, really, of north, which is basically west.
All right, that's enough.
From flying Dalmatian murder dogs to flying Dalmatian murder women. You'd easily mistake Emma Stone's theatrical antics for the latest Batman flick. But while I haven't seen Zack Todd's Justice League or Philip Schneider's The Joker, I have seen every single 101 Dalmatians media out there, and when it comes to how Cruella interpreted its titular villain and other elements of the Dalmatians franchise, I have a few opinions. And I hope to answer the question, why in the heck hall was Cruella a prequel? But first, an intro graphic. In 1961, Walt Disney Productions released its 17th animated film, 101 Dalmatians, based off the children's story by Dodie Smith. The story follows Pongo and Perdita, two Dalmatians living in London with their humans, Anita and Roger, as the canine parents must travel across the countryside and endure hardship to save their puppies from the fur-obsessed Cruella de Vil, who seeks to turn them all into a fur coat. The film was a critical and financial success. Though Walt himself was more concerned with parks and television at the time, 101 Dalmatians managed to save the animation studio by proving that you can make a lucrative animated film on a budget. It also solidified Cruella de Vil as one of the top-tier Disney villains, alongside the likes of Lady Tremaine and Captain Hook. So when Michael Eisner took the reins of Disney as CEO in 1984 and started adding new additions to classic Disney canons, 101 Dalmatians was one of the first to see adaptation. This, of course, started with the 1996 live-action animated film starring Glenn Close as Cruella. Since the 1996 film, we've also seen a 1997 animated series which blends together elements of the live-action film and the original animated film, a 2000 live-action sequel, a 2003 animated sequel, and a 2018 British-Canadian animated series which is described on Wikipedia as non-canon. And in every single one of these Dalmatians media, we have seen Cruella appear, usually as the antagonist. Her name, her aesthetic, her love of fur, and of course, her hair, black and white split right down the middle, makes her one of the most iconic and recognizable of Disney villains. So much so that when Disney was deciding which 4 villains would be the parents of their main characters in 2015's Descendants, a film which focuses on how those villains' legacies affected their kids in a fantasy kingdom realm, they chose to put puppy napper Cruella there alongside the likes of Maleficent, the Evil Queen, and Jafar. That is just how iconic she is!
Carlos! Is that a dog? Oh, yes, baby, I do understand. It would make the perfect size for earmuffs.
So after 2014's Maleficent proved the vitality of villain-centered stories, it only makes sense for Disney to move forward with a Cruella-focused film. There's always been some interest in reforming Cruella. That 2000s live-action sequel I mentioned before, also starring Glenn Close, features a story in which Cruella is rehabilitated through hypnotherapy and devotes her life to dog shelters, all the while calling herself Ella. The 1996 animated series kept Cruella as the antagonist, but dropped the more gruesome fur aspects of the character, opting instead for an arc where she's trying to steal the farm from Roger, Anita, and the Dalmatians. This series also featured a few flashback elements to Cruella's childhood, but they tend to fudge the timeline a little bit. The point I'm trying to make is that it's about time we heard Cruella's side of the story. Part 2. Cruella's side of the story.
There's no such thing as evil, you know? Everyone is the hero of their own story.
At least according to 2021's Cruella. That film focuses primarily on a young Cruella de Vil, played by Emma Stone, living as a thief alongside Horace and Jasper 10 years after watching Dalmatians push her mother off a cliff. She is employed by a haute couture fashion designer, the Baroness, played by Emma Thompson, where she designs dresses for her spring collection. We are also introduced to Anita, played by Kirby Howell-Baptiste, who in this film is a gossip columnist covering fashion events and one of Cruella's only friends in school. Following a lot of bizarre turns that I do not need to go into, Cruella decides to work for the Baroness by day and spend her nights humiliating her boss in her punk rock alter ego, having dyed her hair back to its natural color of black and white in order to conceal her identity. She also somehow convinces Anita to stop covering the Baroness and to cover Cruella's street performance art instead. Anita is also threatened in her office by the Baroness, who is trying to figure out who Cruella is, and it's really one of the more fantastically acted scenes in the movie. There's a lot of great tension and build-up for all these characters leading up into what I think is one of the most integral points in the film, that being when Cruella destroys the Baroness's spring collection, upstages her in a coat of Dalmatian print, and convinces her enemy and everybody else that the Dalmatian print is from actual Dalmatians, all to the tune of the Stooges' I Wanna Be Your Dog. There's a bit more that happens in the film, like, Cruella finds out that the Baroness is her real mother and plans to steal her estate by forging her will and framing her for murder, but that's not really pertinent to what we're talking about right now, so let's just stick to what I already summarized. Though traditionally more of a spoiled heiress type, the 1996 Glenn Close version saw the character of Cruella evolve into the ruler of a fashion empire, the House of DeVille. A few other elements that this film also changed were setting it in modern-day 90s and having Anita work for Cruella as a designer. Since Glenn Close was co-producer on Cruella 2021, similar elements have made their way into the film. Both Cruella and Anita have fashion-related careers, and Cruella comes to Anita asking for help starting her own label, presumably House of DeVille. Cruella convinces Anita to help by promising her more readers to her gossip column. All Anita has to do is cover Cruella's stunts against the Baroness. And did this help Cruella's goal of starting her own label or help Anita get more readers? We don't know! Neither are mentioned again in the film. Remember that scene I brought up earlier where the Baroness threatens Anita? That's the last time Anita speaks in the film. The rest of the time she's just there, in the background, to gawk at whatever genius Cruella's doing on screen. Emma Stone and Kirby Howell-Baptiste only appear in one shot together, and it's right here. She's essentially a glorified cameo. She shows kindness to Cruella in school, and 10 years later gets asked to drop a well-known fashion designer in favor of newcomer Cruella. And she agrees! And after taking such a huge risk on her friend, how is Anita rewarded? With a puppy. In the after credits scene. After the movie is over, alongside... Oh no. We forgot about Roger. Part 3. Who Framed Roger Radcliffe? Cruella and the audience are first introduced to Roger as the Baroness's lawyer, where he's played by Kay Van Novak. The Baroness, who has given no other information about any of her other employees up to this point in the film, introduces him as a damn fine lawyer and a piano player. In his second appearance in the film, just shortly before the spring collection scene, Roger is fired by the Baroness for failing to bring legal action against Cruella, and he is dropped out on the curb while her car drives away. Emma Stone's voice then comes over the narration and makes two very wild claims. The first is that Roger was fired because...
He's Roger.
Implying that she has some deep distaste for Roger despite only having met him a short time ago and expressing an interest in piano to him when they first met.
Piano's nice.
The second claim is that Roger hates Cruella, which is also ridiculous because in the two scenes he's been in, he's expressed no personal opinions toward Cruella and has only been abused by the Baroness. This all concludes with Roger's final appearance in the film, that mid-credits scene I mentioned, where Roger gets a puppy from Cruella and then proceeds to write this. We're just meant to understand that Roger wrote that song because he inexplicably blames Cruella for getting him fired and hates her, and in the retrospect of telling us this story, Cruella hates him because he wrote that song. I guess. I think the original animated Roger stands the test of time as being one of the more memorable and charming of Disney men. His musical talents, love of animals, and of course clear affections towards his wife Anita make him a top contender for most wettable for sure. So why did Cruella have to go out of its way to deliberately throw him under the bus? Maybe the film wanted to make a commentary on how Roger wrote the Cruella de Vil song prior to learning about Cruella's plan to kill the puppies in the first place, implying that it was pretty mean-spirited to begin with. In fact, he manages to record, produce, and get that song on the radio before he ever even learns that Cruella was involved with the disappearance of the puppies at all. Maybe this is just Roger getting what he deserves. But honestly, I think Cruella 2021 just fails to deliver on giving us a compelling reason on why Roger wrote Cruella de Vil, despite it being arguably one of the most important elements of the Cruella character. I still think that Roger and Anita both deserve better, and the script even had all the pieces to give it to them. Let me explain. Part 4, the prequel versus reimagining. Imagine for a moment that Cruella wasn't a prequel, but instead a straightforward reimagining of 101 Dalmatians, in the same vein as 2014's Maleficent. Cruella really isn't the big baddie, her side of the story was being mistold, she never wanted to make a coat out of puppies, and she doesn't hate Roger. And since this isn't a prequel, that also means that Roger and Anita can meet, since we don't have to set that up for an upcoming film. So imagine for a moment when Cruella and Roger first meet and Cruella expresses her interest in piano, that they actually decide to hang out, and maybe Roger shows her some of the songs he's working on. And maybe he's like, hey, I've been working on this tune, but I just can't figure out the lyrics. And he starts playing it, and it's that familiar tune we all know. And Cruella's like, oh, well, maybe you just need some genius inspiration, something like that. And maybe he even figures out who Cruella is, but won't give that information up to the Baroness when she pursues legal action. This, in turn, leads the Baroness to fire him when he fails and toss him on the curb. This also creates a parallel between him and Anita, who is also threatened by the Baroness for not giving up the real identity of Cruella. And now, being fired by the Baroness is all the motivation Roger needs to join Cruella's side. And just a few scenes later, when we get to the concert in Regent's Park, oh, well, who's that on stage? Is that punked out K-Van Novak? And what's he doing? Why, he's playing a rock rendition of his song, Cruella de Vil. Only this time, instead of being a mean-spirited parody, it's a rock anthem celebrating the artist. And then Anita would come out from the evacuated show and would lock eyes with Roger on stage. It'd be a moment. Now, I know what you're thinking. TJ, he can't have written that song at that moment because Cruella had not chosen her surname de Vil by that point in the story. And I know that. That's why we've got to rework the whole thing. Everything is there for this to be a reimagining. You've got the scene where Cruella berates Horace and Jasper and demands they steal the Dalmatians, the scene where she drives her panther de Vil, the scene where Horace and Jasper distract the Dalmatians by putting on the TV, Horace comparing people to their dogs, Roger writing Cruella the song, and, of course,
questions are being raised over whether her coat was real Dalmatian.
But 2021's Cruella is explicitly a prequel. That means that each of the moments I describe will theoretically happen again in canon to the exact same people in slightly different ways. While watching the scene where Cruella apologizes to Horace and Jasper for, quote, going mad and being mean to them, all I can think was, she's not done doing that, now is she? If these were just the pieces of 101 Dalmatians reimagining, we would understand these elements to be straightforward parallels to elements in the original film. Cruella, the reimagining, could have asked us to reconsider these elements as being misrepresented in previous tellings, as Maleficent did before it. But, ultimately, we're meant to understand that none of these characters will truly experience growth. Cruella will not stop being abusive towards her family members, Horace and Jasper. She will try to make a coat out of Roger and Anita's puppies, and, apparently, she might not even get that much backlash for it. In conclusion,
I have a cold due to my lack of fur coat.
I got a fever, and the only prescription is fur coat.
On June 4th, 2021, a little over a week after Cruella premiered, Disney announced that it had begun development on a sequel, with both Emma Stone and Emma Thompson returning to reprise their roles. The stars implied that they wanted a Godfather-like sequel, and Glenn Close, former de Vil and co-producer of Cruella, expressed an interest in returning to the character Cruella as well. All this to say that Cruella's status as a prequel was more intended to be the beginning of a new franchise and less to be a direct precedent to the original film, meaning the writers intended to leave a lot of room for sequel material. Overall, though, the film was well received, and I enjoyed it a lot myself. It was fun. I wouldn't even be complaining if the film didn't imply that Pongo and Perdita were from the same litter in the mid-credits scene. They're supposed to be the parents of the puppies, Disney. They can't be siblings! Thank you guys so much for watching. This was my first video, and I really wanted to do it on Cruella because I really enjoyed the film, and I had a lot to say, and this was a lot of fun. So if you guys enjoyed it, please go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. And I would like to create more content in the future, so let me know what you guys would like to see. Okay? Bye!